When the lights went out across the entire planet for 47 minutes, 847 people died. Within hours, the world had found its villain, Elon Musk. His satellites had failed. His technology had killed innocent people. The evidence was right there on every screen, a message signed Starlink Emergency Protocol. But the man who usually fought back against every critic stayed silent. No tweets, no interviews, no angry defenses. For a week, as protesters called him a murderer and world leaders demanded his arrest, Elon Musk said nothing. His silence was the strangest part of all, because what the world didn't know was that the message blaming him was a lie. The satellites hadn't failed, they had worked perfectly. And the 47 minutes of darkness that killed 847 people had actually saved 6 billion others from a fate far worse than death. The truth would eventually come out. But when it did, it would reveal something even more shocking than the world's biggest technology disaster. IT would reveal the night one man had 3 minutes to choose between saving some people and saving everyone, and the quiet heroes who helped him make that choice. Maria Santos was singing softly to her baby daughter when the world stopped working. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday night in March 2025. Outside her small apartment window in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the city sparkled with millions of lights. Cars moved through busy streets. People walked on sidewalks, talking on their phones. Everything looked normal. Then it all went dark. The lights in Maria's apartment flickered once, twice, then died. Her phone screen went black. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. Even the digital clock on her microwave disappeared. What happened? Maria whispered, holding her 6-month-old daughter closer. She walked to the window and gasped. The entire city of Sao Paulo had vanished into darkness. No streetlights, no traffic signals, no lit windows in other buildings. It was like someone had turned off a giant switch. But the darkness wasn't just in Sao Paulo. 3,000 miles north, in New York City, Dr. James Chun was in the middle of saving a life. The 7-year-old boy on the operating table had been hit by a car. His small body was broken, but Dr. Chun had seen worse. He could fix this. The surgery lights were bright and steady. Dr. Chin's hands moved carefully, repairing damaged organs. The boy's heart monitor beeped in a steady rhythm. Then the lights went out. "What's happening?" shouted a nurse. The heart monitor stopped beeping. The breathing machine stopped working. In the sudden darkness, Dr. Chun could barely see the child. On the table, "Get the backup generators," Dr. Chun yelled. But when they tried to start the backup power, nothing happened. The generators were dead too. Dr. Chun had never seen anything like it. Every piece of medical equipment in the entire hospital had stopped working at exactly the same time. Halfway around the world, 12-year-old Priya Sharma was video chatting with her grandmother in London. Priya lived in Mumbai, India, and these evening calls were the best part of her day. "Tell me about school, Beta," her grandmother said, smiling from the computer screen. "We learned about space today, Grandmama. Did you know there are thousands of satellites flying around Earth right now? How wonderful. And what do these satellites do? They help our phones work. They help the internet work," our teacher said. "They're like invisible helpers in the sky." Priya was about to say more when her grandmother's face froze on the screen. Then the image broke apart into little squares. Then the screen went completely black. "Grandmama," Priya called out. She pressed buttons on the computer, but nothing happened. She tried her mother's phone, but it was dead too. Outside her bedroom window, the lights of Mumbai were going out one by one, like candles being blown out by a giant breath. In London, Priya's grandmother was staring at her own black screen, wondering what had happened to her granddaughter. The darkness was spreading everywhere. In Tokyo, a businessman walking home from work watched as every screen in the electronic district went dark at once. Thousands of bright advertisements and video displays just stopped. In Lagos, Nigeria, a woman giving birth in a hospital screamed as the medical equipment around her shut down without warning. In Mexico City, an air traffic controller watched in horror as his radar screen went blank. Dozens of airplanes were flying through the sky above him, and suddenly he couldn't see any of them. The Great Blackout, as history books would later call it, lasted exactly 47 minutes and 23 seconds. But those 47 minutes felt like forever. Maria Santos held her crying baby in the dark apartment, trying to stay calm. She could hear people shouting in the street below, Car horns were honking, but she couldn't see any headlights. Dr. James Chun worked by the light of his cell phone's flashlight, which had somehow started working again after a few minutes. He and 3 nurses kept the injured boy alive using manual breathing equipment and basic tools. No machines, no computers, just their hands and their training. Priya Sharma sat by her window, looking out at the dark city. Her parents were somewhere in the building, probably trying to figure out what was wrong. She wasn't scared exactly, but she felt very alone. Then, at exactly 10:34 p.m., the lights came back on, all of them, everywhere. At the same moment, Maria's apartment filled with light. Her phone buzzed back to life. The refrigerator started humming again. In New York, the hospital's machines beeped and whirred as they restarted. Dr. James Chun looked at the boy's vital signs on the heart monitor. Still alive, still fighting. In Mumbai, Priya's computer screen flickered, and her grandmother's worried face appeared. "Priya, are you okay? What happened?" "I don't know, Grandmama. Everything just stopped working." Around the world, people were asking the same question. What had just happened? Then, as the internet came back online, something strange appeared on every screen, every phone, every device connected to the web. The message was in big, red letters. It appeared in every language: English, Spanish, Chinese, Hindi, Arabic, and hundreds of others. The words were the same everywhere. The satellite network has malfunctioned. Millions will die without immediate action. This is not a drill. Below the message was a name that made everyone's blood run cold. Starlink Emergency Protocol Starlink. Everyone knew that name. It was Elon Musk's company. His satellites. His technology. Within minutes, news reporters around the world were asking the same questions. What had Elon Musk done? How many people had died during those 47 minutes? And why had his satellites failed when the world needed them most? Maria Santos looked at the message on her phone and felt angry. Someone's mistake had put her baby in danger. Someone's carelessness had caused this terror. Dr. James Chun read the message on his hospital computer and shook his head. Medical equipment failing because of satellite problems? It didn't make sense, but someone had to be responsible. Priya Sharma didn't understand all the words in the message, but she could tell it was serious. Her parents were in the living room, watching the news and talking in worried voices. By midnight, #BlameElon was trending on social media. By morning, protesters would be gathering outside every building owned by Elon Musk's companies. But that night, as the world tried to understand what had happened, Elon Musk himself was completely silent. No tweets, no statements, no explanations for a man famous for responding to every criticism, every news story, every comment about his companies. His silence was the strangest thing of all. What nobody knew yet was that Elon Musk's silence wasn't because he didn't care. It was because he was trying to figure out how to tell the world that everything they thought they knew about that night was wrong. The satellites hadn't failed. The emergency message hadn't come from Starlink. And the 47 minutes of darkness hadn't been a disaster at all. It had been a rescue. But the world didn't know it had been a rescue. All they knew was that someone had to pay. By 6 in the morning, angry crowds were gathering outside Tesla factories in California and Texas. By 7, protesters filled the streets around SpaceX headquarters. By 8, every news channel in the world was telling the same story. Elon Musk had caused a disaster. Sarah Williams stood in front of the cameras at CNN headquarters in Atlanta. She had been a news anchor for 15 years, but she had never felt this angry about a story. "Good morning. I'm Sarah Williams, and this is a special report about last night's global blackout." Her voice was shaking with rage. Elon Musk's Starlink satellites control most of the world's internet. His company's failure left hospitals without power, planes flying blind, and emergency services helpless. She looked directly into the camera. The question isn't whether Elon Musk is responsible for what happened. The question is how many people died because he was careless with technology that the whole world depends on. Behind Sarah, the news studio showed a map of the world. Red dots marked every place where someone had died during the 47 minutes of darkness. There were 847 red dots. Each dot was a person. Each person had a family. In London, Prime Minister Charlotte Davies called an emergency meeting with her top advisors. The meeting room in 10 Downing Street was full of worried faces. "How many British citizens died last night?" she asked. 37. replied her health minister. Most were elderly people whose medical equipment failed. Prime Minister Davies slammed her hand on the table. This is unacceptable. One man has built a monopoly in space, and now he's killed our people. She stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see protesters holding signs that read, "Musk equals murderer and space criminal." "Call a press conference," she ordered. "I want the world to know that Britain will not stand for this." 2 hours later, Prime Minister Davies stood before reporters from around the world. "Elon Musk has been given too much power," she declared. "His satellites control our communications. And when they failed, people died. The blood is on his hands, and he must face justice." In Mexico, President Elena Rodriguez was even more angry. The blackout had hit during dinner time in Mexico City, and several restaurants had lost power while people were cooking. 3 people had died in kitchen fires when backup systems failed. President Rodriguez spoke to her nation on television. "Mr. Musk's satellites nearly killed my people. We trusted him with our technology, and he let us down when we needed him most. This cannot happen again." But the loudest anger came from regular people on social media. Videos spread across the internet showing families crying over loved ones who had died during the blackout. A grandmother in Germany whose pacemaker had stopped working. A baby in India whose breathing machine had shut down. A teenager in Canada who had been hit by a car when traffic lights failed. Hashtag Musk Must Pay became the most popular hashtag in the world. People shared photos of the 847 victims. They wrote angry messages demanding that Elon Musk go to prison. One video showed a woman named Patricia Cole from Ohio. She was holding a photo of her husband, who had died during emergency surgery when the hospital lost power. "My husband was going to be fine," she sobbed into the camera. "The doctors said the surgery was almost finished. But then Musk's satellites failed and the machine stopped working. My husband died in the dark because one man was careless with technology." The video was watched 50 million times in 6 hours. Rebecca Torres, a reporter for The Washington Post, drove to SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. She had covered technology companies for 10 years, but she had never seen anything like this. The normally busy building was surrounded by hundreds of protesters. Police cars lined the street. Security guards stood at every entrance. Rebecca set up her camera across from the main gate and waited. At 2:30 p.m., a black Tesla drove up to the security checkpoint. "Mr. Musk," Rebecca shouted, running toward the car with her microphone. "What do you have to say about the deaths caused by your satellites?" The car's windows were tinted, but she could see the outline of someone in the back seat. The person didn't wave, didn't roll down the window, didn't even look in her direction. "Mr. Musk, people are calling you a murderer. Don't you have anything to say?" The Tesla drove through the gate and disappeared into the SpaceX parking garage. Rebecca stared at the building. In all her years covering Elon Musk, she had never seen him avoid reporters. He usually loved talking to the press, especially when he was angry about something. But now, when the whole world was attacking him, he was completely silent. That night, things got worse for Musk's companies. Tesla stock dropped by 40%. SpaceX lost 3 major contracts with government agencies. Someone spray-painted "murderer" in red letters across the side of a Tesla factory in Austin, Texas. A group called Families for Justice announced they were filing a lawsuit against Elon Musk for $10 billion. Their lawyer, David Martinez, held a press conference outside a courthouse in New York. "Elon Musk built a dangerous monopoly in space," Martinez declared. "His reckless business practices killed 847 innocent people. We will make sure he pays for every life lost." Behind Martinez stood 30 families who had lost loved ones during the blackout. They held photos of their dead relatives and wiped tears from their eyes. But through all of this, Elon Musk said nothing. No tweets, no interviews, no angry responses on social media. His silence was the strangest part of the whole story. Everyone who knew Elon Musk knew he couldn't resist defending himself when people criticized him. He had fought back against reporters, politicians, and competitors for years. Why wasn't he fighting back now? Rebecca Torres had covered Musk for years, and she couldn't understand it. She called sources at Tesla and SpaceX, but nobody would talk to her. She tried to reach Musk's publicist, but the phone went straight to voicemail. IT was like Elon Musk had disappeared from the world. That evening, Rebecca stood outside SpaceX headquarters again. Most of the protesters had gone home, but a few remained, holding candles for the people who had died. At 8 p.m., the same black Tesla drove out of the parking garage. This time, Rebecca was ready. She ran alongside the car as it moved slowly through the crowd. Through the window, she caught a glimpse of Elon Musk's face. That he looked terrible. His eyes were red, like he had been crying. His hair was messy. His face was pale and tired. But the strangest thing was his expression. Rebecca had expected him to look angry or defensive. Instead, he looked heartbroken, like someone whose dog had died, like someone who had lost everything that mattered to him. The Tesla drove away into the California night, and Rebecca was left with more questions than answers. Why wouldn't the world's most famous entrepreneur defend himself? What was Elon Musk hiding? And why did he look so sad instead of angry? Around the world, people went to bed that night certain of one thing. Elon Musk was responsible for the worst technology disaster in human history. They had no idea that everything they believed was wrong. They had no idea that the man they were calling a murderer had actually saved every single one of their lives. But Senator Patricia Cline was determined to prove otherwise. Senator Cline had spent 20 years in Congress fighting for ordinary people against big corporations. She had taken on oil companies, drug makers, and tech giants. Now she had the biggest target of all, Elon Musk. "We will get answers," she promised reporters outside the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. If Elon Musk's careless business practices caused this disaster, he will face the full power of the United States government. Behind her, the American flag flapped in the morning breeze. Senator Cline's gray hair was pulled back tightly, and her blue eyes burned with determination. "I am calling for immediate hearings into this tragedy. The American people deserve to know how one man's mistakes killed 847 innocent souls." The hearings were scheduled to begin exactly 1 week after the blackout. The Hart Senate office building was packed with reporters, families of victims, and protesters demanding justice. Senator Cline sat at the center of a long table, surrounded by other senators and congressmen. In front of them was a single chair, where witnesses would sit and answer questions. "These hearings will discover the truth," Senator Cline announced as cameras flashed around the room. "We will find out exactly what went wrong with Mr. Musk's satellites, and we will make sure it never happens again." The first witness was Dr. Amanda Foster, a former SpaceX engineer who had quit the company 6 months before the blackout. Dr. Foster was a small woman with short brown hair and nervous eyes. She sat in the witness chair and raised her right hand to swear she would tell the truth. "Dr. Foster," Senator Cline began, "you worked on the Starlink satellite system for 3 years. In your expert opinion, could this blackout have been prevented?" Dr. Foster shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Senator, the Starlink system has multiple safety protocols. What happened that night? It shouldn't have been possible. But it did happen. And Elon Musk was in charge of those satellites. Doesn't that make him responsible for the deaths that followed?" Dr. Foster opened her mouth to answer, but before she could speak, the hearing room doors burst open with a loud bang. A man in a wrinkled gray suit stumbled into the room, breathing hard, like he had been running. His tie was crooked, and his hair was messy. "Senator Cline," he gasped, trying to catch his breath. Senator Cline banged her wooden gavel on the table. "Sir, you cannot interrupt these proceedings. Security, please remove this man." "Wait," the man shouted, holding up his hand. "I'm Dr. Michael Park from NASA. You need to stop this hearing immediately." The room fell silent. Even the reporters stopped taking pictures. Senator Cline's face turned red with anger. "Dr. Park, I don't care if you're from NASA or from Mars. You cannot just burst into a congressional hearing." "Senator, please," Dr. Park said, walking toward the witness table. "The information you're discussing here is wrong. Everything is wrong." "What are you talking about?" Dr. Park pulled a tablet computer from his jacket pocket. His hands were shaking as he turned it on. "We've been studying the data from that night for 7 days straight. Teams of scientists from NASA, the European Space Agency, and observatories around the world. What we found," he paused and looked around the packed room. "What we found changes everything." Senator Cline leaned forward. "Dr. Park, please explain yourself clearly." "The blackout wasn't caused by Starlink's satellites malfunctioning," Dr. Park said, his voice getting stronger. "The satellites didn't fail. They saved us. The room exploded in confused voices. Reporters started shouting questions. Family members looked at each other with puzzled faces. Senator Klein banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. Order in this hearing room. When the noise finally died down, Dr. Park continued. At exactly 9:46 p.m. on March 15th, 1 minute before the blackout began, our deep space monitoring systems detected something we've never seen before. He held up his tablet so everyone could see the screen. It showed a graph with lines and numbers that most people couldn't understand. This shows an enormous energy burst heading straight toward Earth. It was a solar storm, but unlike any solar storm in recorded history. The energy was so powerful that if it had hit our electrical systems while they were running normally, Dr. Park's voice trailed off. What would have happened? Senator Klein asked quietly. Every electrical device on Earth would have been permanently destroyed. Not just turned off, but completely fried. No computers, no phones, no medical equipment, no power plants, no cars, nothing. The room was completely silent now. Even the camera crews had stopped moving. How long would it have taken to rebuild? Asked Senator Klein. Years, maybe decades. Billions of people would have died without modern technology. Dr. Foster, the former SpaceX engineer, spoke up from the witness chair. Dr. Park, are you saying that someone knew this solar storm was coming? Not just someone, Dr. Park replied. Someone with access to the most advanced space monitoring equipment in the world. Someone who could make a split-second decision to shut down the entire global power grid. He looked directly at Senator Klein. Someone who had less than 10 minutes to choose between saving most people or losing everyone. Senator Klein's voice was barely a whisper. Are you telling me that Elon Musk deliberately caused the blackout? I'm telling you that Elon Musk saved civilization, Dr. Park said firmly. The Starlink satellites didn't malfunction. They were programmed to shut down Earth's power systems when they detected the incoming solar storm. It was an emergency protocol, designed to protect the electrical grid from being permanently destroyed. A woman in the front row suddenly stood up. It was Maria Santos, the mother from Sao Paulo who had been holding her baby when the lights went out. Wait, she said, her voice shaking. You're saying that Mr. Musk chose to turn off the power? That he made my baby cry in the dark on purpose? Dr. Park looked at her with gentle eyes. Mrs. Santos, if Mr. Musk hadn't made that choice, your baby wouldn't be alive today. None of us would be. The solar storm would have destroyed every electrical device on Earth permanently. Hospitals would have lost power forever. Food couldn't be transported. Clean water systems would have failed. Within weeks, most of humanity would have died. Maria sat down heavily, her face pale with shock. Senator Klein shuffled through her papers, clearly struggling to understand this new information. Dr. Park, if this is true, why didn't Mr. Musk explain himself? Why did he let the world blame him for a disaster? Before Dr. Park could answer, a quiet voice spoke from the back of the hearing room. Because I wasn't sure anyone would believe me. Every head in the room turned. There, standing in the doorway like a ghost, was Elon Musk himself. That he looked older than he had a week ago. His famous black hair was gray at the edges. His eyes were tired and sad. But he walked steadily toward the front of the room, past the shocked reporters and confused family members. Senator Klein, he said quietly, I think it's time I told everyone the truth about that night. The hearing room fell silent as Elon Musk walked down the center aisle. Camera flashes exploded around him, but he didn't look at the photographers. His eyes were fixed on Senator Klein. Every person in the room held their breath. For a week, the world's most famous inventor had said nothing while millions of people called him a killer. Now, finally, he was ready to speak. Senator Klein gripped her gavel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Mr. Musk, you cannot simply walk into a congressional hearing without being called as a witness. Then call me as a witness, Musk replied, still walking toward the front. Because what Dr. Park just told you is only part of the story. He reached the witness table and stood behind the empty chair. For a moment, he looked around the packed room at all the faces staring at him. Some looked angry. Some looked confused. Some looked hopeful. I in the front row, Maria Santos clutched her purse and watched him carefully. She had traveled all the way from Brazil to hear answers about why her baby had cried in the dark. Senator, may I sit down? Musk asked politely. Senator Klein hesitated. This wasn't how congressional hearings were supposed to work. But with every camera in the world watching, She couldn't exactly throw him out. "Very well, Mr. Musk. Please take a seat." Musk sat down and leaned toward the microphone. His voice was soft, almost gentle. "I know you all have questions. I know. Families are hurting. I know people died, and I know you blame me for that." He paused and took a deep breath. "I'm here to tell you exactly what happened that night and why I stayed quiet for so long." Rebecca Torres, the reporter from the Washington Post, leaned forward in her seat. This was the biggest story of her career. First, Musk continued, "Dr. Park is right about the solar storm, but he's wrong about one thing. I didn't have 10 minutes to make my decision. I had less than 3 minutes." He pulled out his own tablet and connected it to the room's big screen. Suddenly, everyone could see complex charts and numbers. At 9:44 p.m., our deep space satellites detected an energy wave unlike anything we'd ever seen. It was racing toward Earth at incredible speed. Our computers calculated it would hit the planet at exactly 9:47 p.m. The chart showed a massive spike of energy heading toward a small blue dot representing Earth. My team ran the numbers 3 times to be sure. If this solar storm hit while the world's electrical systems were running normally, the electromagnetic pulse would fry every circuit on the planet permanently. Senator Klein leaned forward. "Mr. Musk, if you knew this was coming, why didn't you warn people? Why didn't you call the president or NASA or someone in authority?" Musk looked directly at her. "Senator, I had 3 minutes. 3 minutes to save civilization. How long do you think it would take to call the president, explain the situation, get him to understand the science, have him call other world leaders, and coordinate a global response?" The room was completely quiet. Everyone was doing the math in their heads. By the time I convinced the first person that this was real, everyone on Earth would be dead. Rebecca Torres raised her hand. "Mr. Musk, are you saying you made the decision to shut off the world's power without asking anyone?" Musk turned to look at her. His eyes were sad but steady. "Ms. Torres, I made the only decision I could make. The Starlink satellite network was the only system on Earth advanced enough to coordinate a global power shutdown in 3 minutes. I could either let the solar storm destroy everything, or I could cause a temporary blackout to save the electrical grid. But people died during that blackout," said a voice from the audience. Musk's face crumpled with pain. "I know. I've read every report. I've learned the name of every person who died during those 47 minutes. William Johnson, age 73, died when his pacemaker failed. Sarah Chun, age 34, died in a car accident when traffic lights went out. Baby Michael Rodriguez, 6 months old, died when his breathing machine stopped working." The room was so quiet you could hear people breathing. "I think about them every day," Musk continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I know that my choice to save billions of people cost 847 lives. I have to live with that forever." Maria Santos spoke up from the front row. "Mr. Musk, you said the emergency message on our phones came from Starlink. Why did it say millions would die?" Musk looked confused. "What emergency message?" Dr. Park stepped forward. "The message that appeared on every screen after the power came back on. It said, 'The satellite network has malfunctioned. Millions will die without immediate action. This is not a drill.' It was signed with Starlink Emergency Protocol." Musk stared at him. "Dr. Park, Starlink didn't send any message. We don't have an emergency protocol that sends text to civilian devices." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Senator Klein banged her gavel. "Mr. Musk, if you didn't send the message, where did it come from?" Dr. Park pulled out his tablet again. "I think I can answer that. We've been analyzing the electromagnetic data from the solar storm. When that much energy hits Earth's atmosphere, it can create random electrical interference." He showed a new chart on the big screen. The message wasn't sent by anyone. It was created by accident when the solar storm's electromagnetic waves interfered with global communication systems. The random electrical noise just happened to form patterns that looked like words. "So the message was meaningless?" asked Senator Klein. "Worse than meaningless," Dr. Park replied. "It was a cosmic coincidence that made everyone think Starlink had caused the problem." Musk put his head in his hands. "So people blame me for a disaster that I actually prevented because of a random message created by the same solar storm I saved them from." Rebecca Torres was typing frantically on her phone. This story was getting stranger by the minute. "Mr. Musk," she called out, Do you have proof that this solar storm really happened? Musk looked up at her. Show them, Dr. Park. Dr. Park connected his tablet to the room's screen again. This time, the display showed data from space agencies around the world. This is satellite readings from NASA, the European Space Agency, the Chinese National Space Administration, the Indian Space Research Organization, and 12 other countries. They all show the same thing. The largest solar storm in recorded history hit Earth at exactly 9:47 p.m. on March 15, 2025. The screen filled with charts and graphs, all showing the same massive energy spike. Every space agency on Earth has confirmed this data. Dr. Park continued. The solar storm was real, it was huge, and it would have destroyed our civilization if Mr. Musk hadn't acted when he did. Senator Klein sat back in her chair, looking overwhelmed. Mr. Musk, if all of this is true, why didn't you tell us sooner? Why did you let the world think you were responsible for a disaster? Musk was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because even though I saved most people, 847 people still died because of my choice. How do you explain to a grieving mother that her baby died so that billions of other babies could live? How do you tell a man that his wife died so that the rest of the world could survive? He looked at Maria Santos. How do you tell a mother that you deliberately made her baby cry in the dark, even if it was to save that baby's life? Tears were running down Maria's face now. She understood. You couldn't, she whispered. There was no good way to say it. Musk nodded. I thought maybe it would be better if people just hated me. If they blamed me for something terrible instead of trying to thank me for something that cost so many lives. The room was silent except for the sound of people crying. Finally, Senator Klein spoke. Mr. Musk, what you're telling us is that you saved the world, but you were willing to let everyone think you destroyed it? Senator, Musk replied quietly, I didn't save the world. I just gave it a chance to keep existing. His words hung in the air like smoke. The hearing room was so quiet that people could hear their own heartbeats. Senator Klein looked around at the packed room. Reporters had stopped typing. Camera crews had lowered their equipment. Family members sat frozen in their seats. Everyone was trying to understand what they had just heard. Mr. Musk, Senator Klein said slowly, let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're telling us that you deliberately shut off power to the entire planet to save it from a solar storm? That's correct. And this solar storm would have destroyed all electrical equipment permanently. Yes. And you had less than 3 minutes to make this decision. Yes. Senator Klein put down her papers and stared at him. Mr. Musk, do you realize what you're saying? You're claiming that you single-handedly prevented the end of modern civilization. Musk shook his head firmly. Senator, I didn't prevent anything. I just delayed disaster long enough for the solar storm to pass. If I had done nothing, everyone would be dead right now. If I had hesitated for even 1 minute, everyone would be dead right now. Rebecca Torres raised her hand. Mr. Musk, this story sounds incredible. How do we know you're telling the truth? Musk looked at her with tired eyes. Ms. Torres, a week ago the whole world believed I was a murderer. Today I'm trying to convince them I'm not. Do you really think I would make up an even more unbelievable story? Dr. Park stepped forward again. I can verify everything Mr. Musk has said. NASA has been working around the clock to understand what happened that night. Every piece of data confirms his account. He turned to face the room. The solar storm was real. It was massive. And without the emergency shutdown of Earth's power grid, we would all be living in permanent darkness right now. A man in the middle of the room stood up. He was tall and thin, with gray hair and a sad face. My name is Robert Johnson, he said, in a shaky voice. My father died during the blackout. His pacemaker stopped working. The room turned to look at him. Musk's face went pale. Mr. Johnson, Musk said softly, your father was William Johnson. He was 73 years old. He served in Vietnam and had 4 children and 12 grandchildren. Robert's eyes filled with tears. You know about my father? I know about all of them. I've studied every person who died that night. I've read their obituaries. I've learned about their families. Your father was a good man who worked hard his whole life. Robert sat down heavily. Mr. Musk, I've been so angry at you. I blamed you for killing my father. You should blame me, Musk replied. I made the choice that led to his death. Even if it was the only choice I could make, it was still my choice. But if you hadn't made that choice, I would be dead too. Wouldn't I? Musk nodded sadly. Yes, you and your children and your grandchildren and everyone else on Earth. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke in a whisper that the microphones barely picked up. My father was a soldier. He understood about making hard choices to save other people. I think he would have understood why you did what you did. Maria Santos stood up from the front row. She had been crying, but now her voice was strong. Mr. Musk, I came here from Brazil to demand answers. I wanted to know why you put my baby in danger. But now I understand. You didn't put her in danger. You saved her life. She wiped tears from her eyes. When the lights went out that night, I was scared. My baby was crying, and I didn't know what was happening. But she's alive today because of what you did. Mrs. Santos, Musk said gently, I'm sorry your baby had to cry in the dark. I'm sorry you were scared. I wish there had been another way. There wasn't another way, was there? She asked. No, there wasn't. More people began standing up around the room. They were family members who had lost loved ones, but also people who had survived the blackout. A woman from New York spoke up. My son was having surgery when the power went out. The doctors saved his life using flashlights and manual equipment. If the solar storm had destroyed the hospital's machines permanently, he would have died anyway. A man from London added, my grandmother's breathing machine stopped working during the blackout. She died. But if Mr. Musk hadn't acted, the machine would have been destroyed forever, and she would have died anyway, along with everyone else in her nursing home. One by one, people shared their stories. Some had lost family members during the 47 minutes of darkness. Others had survived emergencies thanks to doctors and nurses who worked in impossible conditions. But they all began to understand the same terrible truth. If Elon Musk had done nothing, none of them would be alive to tell their stories. Senator Klein banged her gavel gently. Mr. Musk, I have one more question. When you made this decision, did you think about how people would react? Did you know they would blame you? Musk was quiet for a moment. Senator, I wasn't thinking about how people would react. I was thinking about my own children. I was thinking about all the children in the world. I was thinking about whether they would have a future. And now, how do you feel about being called a murderer for a week? I feel exactly like I deserved it. Because even though I saved most people, I still killed 847 innocent human beings. That's something I have to live with for the rest of my life. Rebecca Torres had been taking notes throughout the hearing. Now she looked up from her notebook. Mr. Musk, what do you want people to understand about that night? Musk thought for a moment before answering. I want them to understand that sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes you have to choose between something terrible and something even worse. I want them to understand that the 847 people who died weren't victims of my carelessness. They were heroes who died so that billions of others could live. He looked around the room at all the faces watching him, and I want them to understand that if we ever face a crisis like this again, I hope someone else has to make the choice. Because no one should have to carry the weight of 847 lives on their conscience. The hearing room was silent except for the sound of people crying. Not just family members who had lost loved ones, but everyone who finally understood what had really happened that night. Senator Klein looked down at her notes, then back at Elon Musk. Mr. Musk, I called these hearings to find out if you were responsible for a disaster. What I've learned instead is that you prevented the end of the world. She paused and looked around the room. I don't know how to write a report about that. Senator Klein's words were broadcast live to every television, computer, and phone in the world. Within minutes, everything changed. The hearing had been watched by more people than any congressional proceeding in history. In living rooms across America, families sat glued to their screens. In offices in Europe, workers stopped what they were doing to listen. In schools across Asia, teachers turned on the news so students could witness history. And as the truth spread, the world's anger turned into something else entirely. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, Maria Santos walked out of the hearing room and into a crowd of reporters. Camera flashes exploded around her, but she didn't look scared anymore. Mrs. Santos, shouted a reporter from Brazilian television. How do you feel about Mr. Musk now? Maria stopped walking and turned to face the cameras. I feel ashamed, she said quietly. I spent a week hating a man who saved my daughter's life. I called him a murderer when he was actually a hero. Her words were translated into dozens of languages and shared around the world within minutes. In London, Prime Minister Charlotte Davies was in an emergency meeting with her advisors when her chief of staff burst into the room. "Prime Minister, you need to see this," he said. Turning on the television. On the screen, they watched Senator Klein announce that the hearings were over. There would be no investigation into Elon Musk. There would be no criminal charges. Instead, Congress was recommending him for the highest civilian honor America could give. Prime Minister Davies sat down heavily in her chair. 2 days ago, she had called Musk a killer on live television. Now she looked like a fool. "Get me the American ambassador," she said quietly. "I need to make some phone calls." In Mexico City, President Elena Rodriguez was watching the news with her family when her daughter asked a simple question, "Mama, why were you angry at the man who saved us?" President Rodriguez didn't have a good answer. On social media, the change was happening even faster. Hashtag Musk must pay disappeared completely. Instead, new hashtags began trending. Hashtag thank you Elon, hashtag sorry Elon, and hashtag hero. Videos that had shown angry protesters were replaced by tearful apologies. People who had called Musk a murderer now posted messages begging for his forgiveness. But not everyone was ready to forgive themselves. Rebecca Torres sat in her hotel room in Washington, D.C., staring at her laptop screen. She had written hundreds of articles in her career, but she had never struggled with words like this. Her newspaper, The Washington Post, had called Elon Musk a reckless billionaire whose carelessness killed hundreds. The headline was still on their website. It was still being shared by people who hadn't heard the news yet. Rebecca picked up her phone and called her editor. "David, it's Rebecca. We need to take down the Musk story immediately." "Why? What happened?" "He didn't cause the disaster. He prevented the end of the world." There was silence on the other end of the phone. "Rebecca, are you feeling okay?" "That sounds impossible." "David, I was in the hearing room. I watched him testify. I saw the scientific data. Everything we wrote was wrong." Within an hour, every major newspaper in the world was rewriting their headlines. Instead of "Musk's satellites kill hundreds," the stories now read, "Musk saves civilization and the man who prevented doomsday." But the person having the hardest time with the news was Senator Patricia Klein herself. She sat alone in her office in the Capitol building, staring at a folder full of angry letters from families who had lost loved ones. For a week, she had promised these families that she would get them justice. She had sworn that Elon Musk would pay for what he had done. Now she had to call each family and explain that the man they wanted to punish had actually saved their lives. Her first call was to Robert Johnson in Detroit. "Mr. Johnson, this is Senator Klein. I'm calling about the hearing today. Senator, I watched it on television. I understand now why my father died. Mr. Johnson, I'm sorry. I promised you justice, and instead I discovered that Mr. Musk was a hero." Robert was quiet for a moment. "Senator, you did get me justice. You got me the truth. That's all I really wanted." But Klein's hardest call was to Patricia Cole in Ohio, the woman whose husband had died during surgery. "Mrs. Cole, I know this is difficult to understand." "Senator," Patricia interrupted, "I don't want to understand. My husband is dead. I don't care if Musk saved the world. I just want my husband back." Klein's voice broke. "Mrs. Cole, I'm so sorry. Are you? Or are you just sorry that your big investigation turned into a hero story?" Klein didn't have an answer for that. Meanwhile, outside SpaceX headquarters in California, something amazing was happening. The angry protesters were still there, but they weren't protesting anymore. Instead, they were leaving flowers. Hundreds of people had come to apologize. They brought handwritten notes, children's drawings, and photos of their families. The families that were alive because of what Elon Musk had done. A little girl named Sophie had drawn a picture of the Earth with a big heart around it. At the bottom, she had written in crayon, "Thank you for saving my mommy and daddy." An elderly man named Frank had brought a photo of his newborn granddaughter. She was born 3 days after the blackout, he told a news reporter. If Mr. Musk hadn't acted, she never would have existed. But the most powerful moment came when a group of doctors and nurses from Los Angeles arrived at the SpaceX gates. Dr. Sarah Kim, who worked at Children's Hospital, spoke for the group. "We came here to thank Mr. Musk for giving us the chance to save lives. During the blackout, we performed surgeries by flashlight. We kept patients alive with manual equipment. It was the hardest 47 minutes of our careers." She held up a list of names. "These are the 23 children we saved that night using emergency procedures. If the solar storm had destroyed our medical equipment permanently, all of these children would have died. Mr. Musk gave us the tools we needed to save them. The crowd of people outside SpaceX had grown to thousands. But they weren't angry anymore. They were grateful. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the scene around the world. The same building that had been surrounded by protesters calling for Musk's arrest was now surrounded by families thanking him for their lives. Inside the building, Elon Musk sat in his office, watching the crowds through his window. His assistant, Jennifer Park, knocked on his door. "Elon, there are reporters asking if you want to make a statement." Musk shook his head. "What would I say? That I'm glad I saved everyone? I can't be glad about something that killed 847 people. But you also can't be sad about saving billions of people." Musk looked at her with tired eyes. "Can't I?" Outside his window, the crowd continued to grow. People held signs that read, "Hero, thank you," and "We're sorry." But Elon Musk wasn't looking at the signs of gratitude. He was thinking about 847 families who would never get their loved ones back, no matter how many people called him a hero. For the first time in his life, being right didn't feel like winning. But the world was determined to treat Elon Musk like a winner whether he wanted it or not. 3 days after the congressional hearing, the changes were everywhere. In Times Square in New York, the giant digital billboards that had once shown angry messages about Musk now displayed, "Thank you, Elon," in letters 50 feet tall. In Paris, the Eiffel Tower was lit up in the blue and white colors of SpaceX as a tribute. In Tokyo, school children made thousands of paper cranes and sent them to Musk with notes of gratitude. But perhaps the most surprising change happened in a small coffee shop in Detroit. Robert Johnson, whose father had died during the blackout, was sitting at a corner table reading the morning newspaper. The headline read, "Congress votes to give Musk highest civilian honor." A young woman at the next table was talking loudly on her phone. "I don't care if he saved the world," she was saying angrily. "My grandfather died that night too. I still think Musk is a murderer." Robert put down his newspaper and turned to look at her. "Excuse me, miss. I couldn't help but overhear." The woman looked annoyed. "What? My father died that night too. His pacemaker stopped working during the blackout." Her expression softened. "Oh, I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you. But I wanted to tell you something. I was angry too. For a whole week, I hated Elon Musk. I wanted him to go to prison. So what changed your mind?" Robert was quiet for a moment. "I realized that being angry at him was like being angry at a doctor who saves 9 patients but loses 1. My father died, but 6 billion other people lived, including you." The young woman stared at him. "But doesn't that make you sad? Don't you miss your father?" "Of course I miss him. I'll miss him every day for the rest of my life. But I know he would be proud that his death helped save the world. He was a soldier. He understood sacrifice." The woman sat down at Robert's table. "I don't know if I can think about it that way." "You don't have to. Everyone grieves differently. But maybe ask yourself this. If your grandfather could have chosen between dying to save 6 billion people or living while everyone else died, what do you think he would have chosen?" Meanwhile, in Sao Paulo, Maria Santos was becoming famous. Without wanting to. After her statement outside the congressional hearing, news stations around the world wanted to interview her. They called her the face of forgiveness and the mother who understood. But Maria didn't feel like a symbol. She felt like a regular person who had learned something important about judging others. Brazilian television sent a crew to her apartment to film a follow-up story. The reporter, Carlos Mendes, sat across from Maria in her small living room while her baby daughter played on the floor. "Mrs. Santos, people are calling you a hero for forgiving Mr. Musk so publicly. How does that feel?" Maria shook her head. "I'm not a hero. Heroes are people like Mr. Musk who make impossible choices to save others. I just learned not to hate someone before I understood what they did. But you were so angry at first. What changed?" Maria picked up her daughter and held her close. "I realized that being angry was easier than understanding. It's simple to blame someone when bad things happen. It's harder to ask why they happened and whether there was a better choice. Do you have a message for other families who lost loved ones that night?" I would tell them that their grief is real and their pain matters. Nothing Mr. Musk did takes away their right to mourn. But I would also tell them that their loved ones didn't die because someone was careless. They died because someone made the hardest choice in human history. Across the ocean in London, Prime Minister Charlotte Davies was having the worst week of her political career. Every newspaper in Britain was criticizing her for attacking Musk before she knew the facts. Political opponents were calling for her resignation. Even her own party members were questioning her judgment. She sat in her office at 10 Downing Street, staring at a draft of the speech she was supposed to give that evening. Her advisors had written an apology, but it felt empty and political. Prime Minister, her chief of staff, said, "The speech is ready for your review." Davies read the first paragraph and shook her head. "This is garbage. It sounds like I'm sorry I got caught, not sorry I was wrong. What would you like to say instead?" Davies thought for a moment. "I want to say that I failed the British people. I want to say that I let my emotions make decisions instead of waiting for facts. And I want to say that Elon Musk deserves not just an apology, but our deepest gratitude." That evening, Prime Minister Davies stood before the cameras and did something that almost never happens in politics. She told the complete truth. "Last week, I called Elon Musk a killer. I said his satellites had murdered British citizens. I was wrong, and I am deeply ashamed of my words." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "Mr. Musk didn't kill anyone. He saved everyone, including me and my children and every person watching this broadcast. I let my anger cloud my judgment, and I owe him an apology that words cannot express." The speech was watched by millions of people around the world. Within hours, other world leaders began making similar statements. President Elena Rodriguez of Mexico: "I accused a hero of being a villain. The shame is mine, not his." Chancellor Hans Müller of Germany: "We owe Elon Musk our lives, and I owe him my personal apology." Prime Minister Yuki Tanaka of Japan: "Mr. Musk carried the weight of the world on his shoulders for 47 minutes. The least we can do is carry the weight of our mistakes." But not everyone was ready to apologize. Senator Patricia Cline held a press conference outside the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. Unlike other politicians, she didn't look sorry. She looked angry. "I've been asked to apologize to Elon Musk," she began. "I've been told that he's a hero and that I was wrong to investigate him." Reporters leaned forward, expecting a typical political apology. "But I won't apologize for doing my job. When 847 people die and someone appears to be responsible, it's our duty to ask questions. Mr. Musk may have saved the world, but he also made a decision that affected every person on Earth without asking anyone's permission." A reporter raised her hand. "Senator, are you saying Mr. Musk was wrong to save civilization?" "I'm saying that no one person should have the power to make decisions for the entire planet, even if those decisions turn out to be right." Another reporter called out, "Senator, what was the alternative? Should he have let everyone die while he called a meeting?" Klein's face flushed red. "There should be protocols. There should be procedures. We can't live in a world where one man's judgment determines whether humanity survives." But even as she spoke, Klein knew she sounded foolish. How do you create a protocol for the end of the world? How do you plan a committee meeting that needs to happen in 3 minutes? The press conference was a disaster. Within hours, videos of Klein's angry speech were being shared across social media with captions like, "Senator wants protocols for doomsday," and "Klein thinks Musk should have held a vote to save the world." That night, Klein sat alone in her office, reading the comments on her own social media accounts. Thousands of people were calling her everything from ungrateful to insane. One comment stood out from the rest. It was from a teenager named Alex in California. "Senator Klein, my mom is a doctor. During the blackout, she delivered a baby using only flashlights. If Mr. Musk hadn't shut off the power, the solar storm would have destroyed every machine in the hospital. That baby would never have been born, and my mom would be dead too. You're angry at the wrong person." Klein stared at the message for a long time. Then she did something she had never done in 20 years of politics. She turned off her computer, went home, and admitted to herself that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong. But while Senator Klein was learning to accept the truth, Elon Musk was doing something that surprised everyone. He was visiting the families of people who had died during the blackout. His first stop was Detroit, Michigan, to see Robert Johnson. Musk's black Tesla pulled up to a small house on the east side of the city. The neighborhood was quiet, with old trees lining the street and children playing in front yards. Robert Johnson was sitting on his front porch when he saw the car. He had been expecting this visit ever since the congressional hearing, but he still felt nervous. Musk got out of the car and walked slowly up the front steps. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit or fancy clothes, just jeans and a simple black shirt. He looked like any other person coming to visit a neighbor. "Mr. Johnson," Musk said quietly, "I'm Elon Musk. Thank you for agreeing to see me." Robert stood up and shook his hand. "Please, come inside." They sat in Robert's living room, surrounded by photos of his father. Pictures of William Johnson in his army uniform, at Robert's wedding, holding his grandchildren, fishing at a lake in northern Michigan. "He looked like a good man," Musk said, studying the photos. "He worked 43 years at the Ford plant. Never missed a day unless one of us kids was sick." Musk nodded. "Mr. Johnson, I came here to apologize. I know my apology can't bring your father back. I know it can't make this better, but I need you to know that I think about him every day." Robert looked surprised. "You do?" "Every morning when I wake up, I remember the names of the 847 people who died because of my choice. Your father's name is always first on the list." They sat in silence for several minutes. Outside, Robert could hear children laughing as they played in the street. "Mr. Musk," Robert finally said, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you ever wish you hadn't done it? Do you ever wish you had just let the solar storm hit?" Musk was quiet for a long time. "Mr. Johnson, I wish there had been another way. I wish I could have saved your father and everyone else too. But do I wish I had let 6 billion people die instead of 847? No, I can't wish for that." Robert nodded. "My father was a soldier in Vietnam. He told me once that the hardest part of war wasn't fighting the enemy. It was living with the choices you made to protect your friends." What did he mean? Sometimes he had to choose which soldiers to send on dangerous missions. Sometimes he had to decide whether to risk 10 lives to save 100. He said those choices never got easier, even when they were right. Musk's eyes filled with tears. "Your father sounds like he was wiser than I am. He would have understood what you did, and he would have forgiven you for it." From Detroit, Musk flew to Los Angeles to visit the family of Sarah Chun, the woman who had died in a car accident when traffic lights failed. Sarah's husband, David Chun, met Musk at a coffee shop near UCLA. David was a physics professor who had followed the story closely and understood the science behind Musk's decision. "Dr. Chun," Musk said as they sat down, "I wanted to tell you how sorry I am about Sarah." David stirred his coffee slowly. "Mr. Musk, my wife was driving home from her book club when the lights went out. She was stopped at an intersection when another car ran into her. The other driver couldn't see the intersection without traffic lights. I know. I've read the police report. Sarah was going to be a grandmother next month. Our daughter is having a baby." Musk's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm sorry. Mr. Musk, do you know what Sarah's book club was reading that night?" Musk shook his head. "A book about the 1918 flu pandemic. They were discussing how sometimes individual tragedies happen during global crises, and how we remember both the people who died and the people who were saved." David pulled out his phone and showed Musk a photo. It was Sarah Chun, smiling and holding a book. Sarah was a smart woman. She would have understood that her death was part of something bigger. She would have been proud that her granddaughter will grow up in a world that you saved. Next, Musk traveled to Phoenix, Arizona, to meet with Carmen Rodriguez, whose 6-month-old son Michael had died when his breathing machine stopped working. This was the visit Musk dreaded most. How do you apologize to a mother for the death of her baby? Carmen met him at a park where she often brought her older children to play. She was pushing her 4-year-old daughter on a swing when Musk arrived. "Mrs. Rodriguez," Musk said, walking up to her carefully. "Thank you for meeting me." Carmen stopped pushing the swing and looked at him. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady. "Mr. Musk, I've been angry at you for 2 weeks. I blamed you for killing my baby. You had every right to be angry, but then I started thinking about something. If the solar storm had destroyed all the electrical equipment permanently, this hospital where Michael was being treated would have been useless. Not just for 47 minutes, but forever." She sat down on a bench and motioned for Musk to sit beside her. "The doctors told me that if Michael's breathing machine had been permanently damaged, there would have been no way to save him. And there would have been no way to save any of the other babies in the hospital either." Carmen's 4-year-old daughter ran over and climbed onto her lap. "This is Sophia," Carmen said. "She's Michael's big sister. Sophia, this is Mr. Musk." Sophia looked at Musk with curious eyes. Are you the man who saved the world? Musk didn't know how to answer. I'm the man who made a very hard choice. Did it make you sad? Yes, it made me very sad. Sophia thought about this for a moment. Mama says Michael is in heaven now, but that you helped make sure the rest of us could stay here on Earth. Carmen hugged her daughter close. Mr. Musk, I can't forgive you yet. I'm not ready, but I want you to know that I don't hate you anymore. I understand why you did what you did. Mrs. Rodriguez, you don't need to forgive me. You don't owe me anything. I know, but maybe someday I will. And when that day comes, I'll think about all the children who are alive because of your choice, including Sophia. Over the next 2 weeks, Musk visited 30 more families. Each visit was different. Some families hugged him and thanked him. Others were still too angry to see him. A few, like Carmen Rodriguez, were somewhere in between. But every visit taught him something about the weight of the choice he had made. In Houston, he met the parents of a teenager who had been hit by a car during the blackout. They showed him their son's room, which they had left exactly as it was. In Boston, he visited an elderly woman whose husband had died when his medication refrigerator lost power. She served him tea and told him stories about their 60-year marriage. In Miami, he met a young mother whose premature baby had died when an incubator failed. She was pregnant again and asked Musk to promise that if he ever had to make a similar choice, he would remember her first baby. Each family's grief was real. Each loss was permanent. But slowly, Musk began to understand something important. The people who had died weren't just statistics. They were individuals with families who loved them. But they were also part of something larger, part of humanity's survival, and their families, even in their grief, understood that too. On his flight back to California after visiting the last family, Musk sat alone in his private jet, looking out at the lights of cities below. For the first time since the blackout, he felt something other than guilt. That he felt grateful. Grateful that people like Robert Johnson and David Chun and even Carmen Rodriguez existed. Grateful that humans could find meaning in tragedy and hope in loss. Grateful that the world was full of people worth saving. But as Elon Musk was learning to live with his choice, someone else was struggling with a secret that could never be told. Amanda Sterling sat alone in her office at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado Springs. The underground facility was one of the most secure places on Earth, built deep inside a mountain to protect America's most important defense systems. Sterling was the director of the Solar Storm Response Team, a group so classified that most presidents never learned it existed. For 15 years, she had monitored space weather and prepared for the day when the sun might threaten civilization. That day had come 3 weeks ago. Now she stared at her computer screen, reading news reports about Elon Musk being called a hero. The headlines made her stomach hurt. Musk saves world with split-second decision. The man who had 3 minutes to save humanity. How Elon Musk became Earth's guardian. But Dr. Sterling knew something that no one else knew. Something that would stay classified for the rest of her life. Elon Musk hadn't had 3 minutes to save the world. He had almost had no time at all. Dr. Sterling's team had detected the massive solar storm at 6:47 p.m., exactly 3 hours before it hit Earth. Standard procedure was to alert the Pentagon, the President, and NASA immediately, but Dr. Sterling had run the numbers. By the time officials were briefed, decisions were made, and orders were given to power companies around the world, the solar storm would have already destroyed everything. So she had made a choice that violated every protocol she had sworn to. Followed at 6:52 p.m., she had sent an encrypted message directly to Elon Musk's personal emergency communication system. The message contained just the raw data about the incoming storm. No explanations, no instructions, no identification of who was sending it. She knew that Musk was the only person on Earth with both the technology and the authority to act fast enough. She also knew that if anyone ever discovered what she had done, she would spend the rest of her life in federal prison. But she also knew that without her warning, even Elon Musk wouldn't have been able to save the world. Now, 3 weeks later, she watched news reports of Musk visiting grieving families and carrying the weight of 847 deaths on his shoulders. She wanted to tell him that he wasn't alone. She wanted him to know that someone else had made the choice to trust him with humanity's survival. But she couldn't. Her assistant, Lieutenant Colonel James Murphy, knocked on her office door. "Dr. Sterling?" The Pentagon is asking for our final report on the solar storm incident. Tell them it will be ready next week. Ma'am, they're specifically asking about how Mr. Musk knew the storm was coming. Intelligence wants to know if he has access to classified space monitoring data. Dr. Sterling's heart raced, but her voice stayed calm. Mr. Musk's own satellites detected the storm. That's in our preliminary report. But ma'am, his satellites wouldn't have had enough range to detect something that far out in space. Then write that he got lucky, Colonel. Sometimes people get lucky. After Lieutenant Colonel Murphy left, Dr. Sterling locked her office door and opened her personal safe. Inside was a single piece of paper, a copy of the message she had sent to Musk. She had kept it as evidence, in case anyone ever questioned the timeline of events. But now she realized it was also evidence of the crime she had committed. Dr. Sterling held the paper over her desk shredder for a long moment. If she destroyed it, there would be no proof that she had warned Musk. The secret would die with her, but if she kept it and someone found it, her career would be over. Her life would be ruined. She thought about Elon Musk, alone in his grief, believing that he had made the hardest choice in human history without help from anyone. She thought about the 847 families who had lost loved ones, never knowing that their relatives had died because of a decision made by two people. Not one. She thought about the 6 billion people who were alive because she had broken the rules and trusted a billionaire inventor to save them all. Dr. Sterling put the paper back in the safe and locked it. Some secrets were worth keeping. Meanwhile, in California, Elon Musk was dealing with his own hidden burden. He sat in his office at SpaceX, staring at the same computer screen he had been looking at for 3 weeks. It showed the message that had warned him about the solar storm. The message that had arrived at 6:52 p.m., giving him almost 3 hours to prepare instead of 3 minutes. Musk had traced the signal as far as he could. It had come from a classified government facility in Colorado. Someone with access to the most advanced space monitoring systems in the world had sent him the data that saved civilization. But who? He could have pushed harder to find out. He could have used his influence with politicians and military leaders to demand answers. He could have hired private investigators to discover the identity of his anonymous helper, but he chose not to. Whoever had sent that message had probably saved more lives than anyone in human history. They had also probably broken serious laws. To do it, they deserved to remain anonymous if that's what they wanted. Elon Musk kept the secret. Just as Dr. Sterling kept hers, he let the world believe that he had detected the solar storm with just minutes to spare. He let people think he was a genius who had saved humanity with split-second reflexes. It was easier than explaining that someone else had taken a huge risk to give him the information he needed. But late at night, when he couldn't sleep, Musk would look up at the stars and wonder about the person who had trusted him with the fate of the world. He hoped they knew that their trust had been worth it. He hoped they understood that the 847 people who had died were not deaths that either of them had caused, but deaths that both of them had tried to prevent, and he hoped that someday, somehow, he would be able to thank them for giving him the chance to save everyone. On the other side of the country, Dr. Sterling was having the same sleepless nights. She would lie in bed in her small apartment near the mountain facility, thinking about the weight that Elon Musk was carrying alone. She had given him the information that made his heroic choice possible, but she could never take credit for it. She could never share the burden of those 847 deaths. She could never tell him that he hadn't been alone in that impossible moment. All she could do was watch the news reports and hope that someday Musk would find peace with what they had done together, because in the end, that's what it had been. Not one person's choice, but two people's choice. One person who had the information and one person who had the power to act on it. One person who had broken the rules and one person who had used those broken rules to save the world. They would probably never meet. They would probably never speak, but they would always be connected by the secret they shared and the lives they had saved together. And maybe, Dr. Sterling thought as she finally fell asleep, that was enough. But the world wasn't ready to let the story end quietly. 1 month after the Great Blackout, everything had changed in ways no one expected. Solar storm monitoring became the most important job on Earth. Every major country promised to build new early warning systems. The United Nations created a special committee to plan for future space weather emergencies. And at the center of it all was Elon Musk, who had become the most famous person on the planet. Time magazine put him on their cover with the headline, "The Man Who Saved Tomorrow." The Nobel Committee announced they were creating a special prize just for him. Children around the world dressed up as Elon Musk for Halloween, but fame wasn't making Musk happy that he sat in his office at SpaceX, looking at a stack of invitations to award ceremonies, television interviews, and speaking events. Everyone wanted to celebrate him. Everyone wanted to hear him tell the story of how he saved the world. The problem was, he didn't feel like a hero. His assistant, Jennifer Park, knocked on his door. "Elon, the president wants to give you the Medal of Freedom next week. It's the highest honor a civilian can receive." Musk shook his head. "Tell them I'm too busy. You can't keep turning down every award. People want to thank you. They're thanking the wrong person." Jennifer looked confused. "What do you mean?" Musk almost told her about the mysterious message that had warned him about the solar storm. He almost explained that someone else deserved the credit for detecting the danger in time, but he caught himself. Dr. Sterling, or whoever had sent that message, had chosen to remain anonymous. It wasn't his right to expose them. "Nothing," he said. "Just schedule the ceremony." Meanwhile, across the country, Dr. Sterling was facing her own unwanted attention. The Pentagon had launched a full investigation into how Elon Musk had known about the solar storm so early. Intelligence agencies were questioning everyone who had access to deep space monitoring data. Dr. Sterling sat in a conference room at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, facing 3 investigators in dark suits. "Dr. Sterling," said the lead investigator, Agent Sarah Coleman, "our analysis shows that Mr. Musk's satellites couldn't have detected the solar storm until 9:44 p.m. But he began shutting down power grids at 9:45 p.m. That suggests he had advance warning. Perhaps Mr. Musk's technology is more advanced than we realize," Dr. Sterling replied calmly. "Or perhaps someone with access to classified data warned him." Dr. Sterling met her eyes steadily. "Agent Coleman, are you accusing me of something? I'm asking if you had any contact with Mr. Musk or his companies on March 15th. No direct contact. It was technically true. She had sent an encrypted message to an automated system, not to Musk personally." Agent Coleman made notes on her tablet. "Dr. Sterling, if someone did warn Mr. Musk, they would have saved billions of lives. That person would be a hero." "Yes, they would be. They would also have committed treason by sharing classified information with a private citizen." Dr. Sterling nodded. "Yes, they would have." The investigation continued for 2 more hours, but Dr. Sterling's answers never changed. She had followed all proper procedures. She had no unauthorized contact with outside parties. She knew nothing about how Musk had learned about the solar storm. When the investigators finally left, Dr. Sterling sat alone in the conference room for a long time. She thought about calling Elon Musk. She thought about telling him that he wasn't carrying the burden alone. She thought about revealing the truth and accepting whatever punishment came with it. But then she thought about her 2 daughters, who were 8 and 10 years old. If she went to prison for treason, what would happen to them? She thought about her team of scientists, who were working harder than ever to build better early warning systems. If she was arrested, who would lead that important work? And she thought about Elon Musk himself. He was already struggling with the weight of 847 deaths. How would he feel if he learned that someone else had risked everything to help him? Would that make his burden lighter or heavier? Dr. Sterling decided to keep her secret. But keeping secrets was getting harder for everyone involved. Rebecca Torres, the reporter from the Washington Post, had been investigating the timeline of events for weeks. She had noticed the same thing. That worried the Pentagon investigators. The math didn't add up. According to every space agency on Earth, Musk's satellites couldn't have detected the solar storm early enough for him to react so quickly. But somehow, he had. Rebecca sat in her apartment in Washington, D.C., surrounded by printed articles, satellite data, and timeline charts. She had covered Elon Musk for years, and she knew he was brilliant. But she also knew he wasn't magic. Someone had helped him. But who? Her phone rang. It was her editor at the Washington Post. "Rebecca, how's the follow-up story coming?" "I'm still working on it. There are some inconsistencies in the timeline that don't make sense." "What kind of inconsistencies?" Rebecca looked at her notes. "David, I think someone warned Musk about the solar storm before his own satellites detected it. Someone with access to government data. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" "Not yet, but I'm going to find it." After she hung up, Rebecca stared at her computer screen. If she was right, this was the biggest story of her career. The man who saved the world had help from someone in the government, someone who had probably broken the law to do it. But as she thought about it more, Rebecca began to wonder if this was a story that should be told. If someone had helped Musk save the world, did it matter? If they had broken rules to save billions of lives, should they be punished for it? And if revealing the truth would hurt both Musk and his anonymous helper, was it worth it? Rebecca had always believed that the truth was more important than anything else. But for the first time in her career, she wasn't sure. She thought about the families Musk had visited, who were slowly learning to find peace with their losses. She thought about the children who were alive because someone had made an impossible choice. She thought about the world that still existed because two people, Musk and his unknown helper, had worked together to save it. Maybe some truths were too important to tell. Maybe some heroes were meant to remain unknown. Rebecca Torres closed her laptop and decided that some stories were more important than the stories themselves. The truth about what really happened on March 15th would remain a secret. And perhaps that was the most heroic choice of all. But there was still one more secret that no one knew. Not Dr. Sterling. Not Elon Musk. Not even the investigators searching for answers. 6 months after the Great Blackout, Dr. Elena Vasquez sat in her office at the International Space Station Mission Control in Houston, staring at data that would change everything. If anyone ever saw it, Dr. Vasquez was the director of the ISS program, and she had spent the last 6 months analyzing what had happened to the space station during the solar storm. What she found kept her awake at night. The International Space Station had been directly in the path of the massive solar storm on March 15th. 6 astronauts were living up there: Commander Sarah Williams from America, Flight Engineer Viktor Petrov from Russia, Mission Specialist Yuki Tanaka from Japan, Science Officer Carlos Mendez from Brazil, Flight Engineer Priya Patel from India, and Research Specialist Emma Clark from Canada. That if the solar storm had hit the ISS while it was running on normal power, all 6 astronauts would have died instantly. But they hadn't died. Dr. Vasquez pulled up the ISS power logs on her computer. At exactly 6:52 p.m. on March 15th, the same moment that Dr. Sterling had sent her warning message to Elon Musk, the space station had automatically switched to emergency power mode. The timing wasn't a coincidence. The ISS was controlled by the same global communication network that Starlink used to coordinate Earth's power systems. When Dr. Sterling's warning triggered Musk's emergency protocols, it had also triggered safety systems on the International Space Station. In other words, Dr. Sterling and Elon Musk hadn't just saved everyone on Earth. They had also saved the 6 people living in space. Dr. Vasquez had kept this information classified for months, trying to decide what to do with it. If she revealed it, people would start asking questions about why the ISS had switched to emergency power 3 hours before the solar storm hit. Those questions might lead back to Dr. Sterling. But Dr. Vasquez also knew that Elon Musk was struggling with guilt over the 847 people who had died. Maybe knowing that he had also saved 6 additional lives would help him find some peace. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a number she had never called before. SpaceX headquarters, this is Jennifer. This is Dr. Elena Vasquez from NASA. I need to speak with Mr. Musk privately. It's about the March 15th incident. An hour later, Musk sat across from Dr. Vasquez in a small conference room at NASA's Johnson Space Center. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, with more gray in his hair and deeper lines around his eyes. Dr. Vasquez, you said this was about the blackout. Mr. Musk, there's something you need to know about what you did that night. Something that wasn't included in any of the official reports. She showed him the ISS power logs on her tablet. The International Space Station was directly in the path of the solar storm. If it had hit while the station was running on normal power, the electromagnetic pulse would have killed all 6 astronauts instantly. Musk studied the data, but they survived. They survived because the ISS automatically switched to emergency power mode at 6:52 p.m., exactly when your emergency protocols began. The same network that allowed you to shut down Earth's power grid also protected the astronauts in space. Musk stared at the screen for a long time. You're saying I saved them too? I'm saying you didn't just save Earth, Elon. You saved everyone. The people on the ground and the people in the sky. For the first time in months, tears of relief ran down Musk's face. I didn't even think about the ISS. I was so focused on Earth, I never considered. That's exactly the point. You made a decision in minutes that most people couldn't make in years. You considered more variables than anyone thought possible. And you saved everyone. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. Elon, I've watched you struggle with guilt for 6 months. You've visited families, you've apologized for deaths that weren't your fault. You've carried a burden that would crush most people. Those 847 people still died because of my choice. Those 847 people died despite your choice. And because of your choice, 6 billion people on Earth lived, plus 6 astronauts in space. You saved 6 billion and 6 lives that night. Musk was quiet for several minutes, processing this new information. Dr. Vasquez, why are you telling me this now? Why didn't this come out during the congressional hearings? Because I knew that questions about the ISS timeline might lead investigators to whoever warned you about the solar storm. I didn't want to put that person at risk. Musk looked at her with surprise. You know someone warned me? I know the math doesn't add up. I know you're too smart to claim you detected something that your satellites couldn't have seen. And I know that whoever helped you probably saved more lives than anyone in human history. She closed her tablet and looked directly at him. I also know that some secrets are worth keeping. After Dr. Vasquez left, Musk sat alone in the conference room for an hour, thinking about the 6 astronauts whose names he had never even known. Commander Sarah Williams, who had 2 children waiting for her return to Earth. Flight engineer Viktor Petrov, whose wife was pregnant with their first child. Mission specialist Yuki Tanaka, who was planning to propose to his girlfriend when he got back. Science officer Carlos Mendez, whose research on the ISS was helping develop new cancer treatments. Flight engineer Priya Patel, who had become the youngest person ever to live in space. Research specialist Emma Clark, whose experiments were studying how to grow food on Mars. 6 people with families, dreams, and futures that would have ended if the solar storm had hit them at full power. 6 people who were alive because a government scientist had broken the rules and trusted a billionaire inventor to make the right choice. 6 people who would probably never know how close they had come to dying or who had saved them. That evening, Musk did something he hadn't done in months. He went home to his children instead of staying late at the office. His youngest son, XAEXI, was playing with toy rockets when Musk walked into the house. "Daddy," the boy called out. "Look, I made a rocket that goes to space." Musk sat down on the floor and watched his son play. "That's a great rocket. Did you know there are real people living in space right now?" "Really? Are they okay up there?" "Yes," Musk said, thinking about the 6 astronauts who were alive because of a decision made in a few desperate minutes 6 months ago. "They're okay." And for the first time since the Great Blackout, Elon Musk felt okay too. He still carried the weight of 847 deaths. He always would. But now he also carried the knowledge that his impossible choice had saved not just billions of people, but every human being who was alive that night, whether they were walking on Earth or floating among the stars. In Colorado, Dr. Sterling would never know about the astronauts she had helped save. In Houston, Dr. Vasquez would never know about the government scientist who had made her revelation possible. In Washington, Rebecca Torres would never know about either of them. But somehow, that seemed right. The greatest heroes often work in shadows, never knowing the full impact of their choices, never seeking credit for their courage. On March 15, 2025, 3 people had worked together to save everyone in the universe. Dr. Sterling, who had the information, Elon Musk, who had the power to act, and Dr. Vasquez, who had kept the secret that protected them both. None of them knew about the others. All of them were heroes. 1 year after the Great Blackout, the world gathered to remember that in Sao Paulo, Brazil, Maria Santos stood in the city's main square, holding her daughter who was now walking and chattering in Portuguese. Around them, thousands of people had come to see the memorial that had been built to honor the 847 people who died during the blackout. The memorial was made of white stone, with 847 small lights that glowed softly in the evening darkness. Each light had a name beneath it: William Johnson, Sarah Chun, baby Michael Rodriguez. All the people whose lives had ended so that billions of others could continue. But the memorial also had something else, a message carved into the stone in every language spoken on Earth, to those who died in the darkness, and to those who chose to save the light. Maria read the words aloud to her daughter, even though the little girl was too young to understand. These people died so you could live. Minha filha, Maria whispered. And a man made the hardest choice in the world so you could have a future. In New York City, Dr. James Chun finished his shift at Mount Sinai Hospital just as he had every day for the past year. The 7-year-old boy who had been on his operating table during the blackout was now 8 years old, healthy, and playing soccer with friends who had no idea how close they had all come to never existing. But Dr. Chun walked past the hospital's new emergency power systems, the most advanced backup generators in the world, designed to work even if all electrical equipment was destroyed. The hospital called it the March 15th Protocol. Every hospital in America now had similar systems. The night that had nearly ended civilization had taught humanity to be ready for the next impossible disaster. In Mumbai, India, 13-year-old Priya Sharma was video calling her grandmother in London, just like she had been doing when the lights went out a year ago. But now their conversations were different. "Grandmama, we learned about heroes in school today," Priya said, her face bright on the computer screen. "Oh, what kind of heroes?" "Not the kind in movies. Real heroes who make hard choices that hurt people they love to save people they don't even know." Her grandmother smiled. "That sounds like a very wise lesson, Beta. Our teacher said the hardest heroes are the ones who do the right thing even when everyone hates them for it, even when they have to carry sadness for the rest of their lives." In Detroit, Michigan, Robert Johnson visited his father's grave on the anniversary of the blackout. The headstone now had fresh flowers every week, not just from Robert's family, but from strangers who had learned William Johnson's story. Someone had left a note that morning. It was from a little girl named Sophie, who had drawn a picture of an old man with angel wings. "Dear Mr. Johnson's family," the note said in careful handwriting. "My mommy says your daddy helped save the world by being brave. I hope he knows that all the kids like me say thank you." Robert smiled through his tears. His father would have liked that at SpaceX headquarters in California, Elon Musk stood before a room full of engineers who were designing the next generation of early warning satellites. The new systems would make solar storm detection faster and more accurate than ever before. "We're not just building technology," he told them. "We're building the tools that might have to save civilization again someday. And if that day comes, I hope whoever has to make the hard choices remembers what we learned a year ago." A young engineer raised her hand. "What's that, Mr. Musk?" "That sometimes saving people means hurting them first. That the hardest choices are the ones where everyone loses something, but the alternative is losing everything. And that the people who make those choices have to live with them forever." After the meeting, Musk sat alone in his office. On his desk was a folder containing letters from families around the world. People thanking him, people forgiving him, people telling him how the blackout had changed their lives. But the letter he read most often was from 10-year-old Amara in Kenya. "Dear Mr. Musk, my teacher says you saved the world, but people were mean to you. That's not fair. When I grow up, I want to help save the world too. But I hope people are nicer to me than they were to you. Thank you for being brave when being brave was scary." At the bottom, she had drawn a picture of the Earth surrounded by satellites, with stick figures of people holding hands around the planet. Musk folded the letter carefully and put it back in the folder. Then he did something he hadn't done since the day after the blackout that he tweeted. The message was simple. "To everyone who forgave a stranger's impossible choice, thank you. To everyone still healing from that night, you're not forgotten. To everyone building a better tomorrow, the future is in good hands." Within minutes, the tweet had been shared around the world. But this time, the responses were different. Instead of anger and blame, there were stories of hope, messages of support, and photos of families grateful to be alive. In Colorado, Dr. Amanda Sterling read Musk's tweet on her phone during her lunch break. She was still working at the Cheyenne Mountain Complex, still monitoring space for threats that might never come. The investigation into how Musk had known about the solar storm had ended months ago with no conclusions. Dr. Sterling's secret was safe, but sometimes, late at night, she would look up at the stars and wonder if Elon Musk knew that he hadn't been alone that night. She hoped he did. She hoped he understood that someone else had shared the weight of that terrible choice. She would never meet him. She would never be able to tell him that she had trusted him with the fate of the world. But that was okay. Heroes didn't need to know each other to work together. In Houston, Dr. Elena Vasquez was watching the evening news coverage of the anniversary. The reporter was interviewing Commander Sarah Williams, the American astronaut who had been on the International Space Station during the solar storm. "Commander Williams, do you ever think about how close you came to disaster that night?" "Every day," Commander Williams replied. "But I don't think about the disaster we almost had. I think about the miracle we received. Someone made a choice that saved not just everyone on Earth, but everyone in space too." "Do you know who made that choice?" "I know it was more than one person. Heroes usually work in teams, even when they don't know it." Dr. Vasquez smiled and turned off the television. Commander Williams was right. In Washington, D.C., Rebecca Torres was finishing the final draft of her book about the Great Blackout. She had spent a year interviewing families, scientists, and government officials. She had uncovered dozens of stories about courage, loss, and forgiveness, but she had never written about the timeline inconsistencies that had bothered her. She had never mentioned her suspicion that someone had helped Elon Musk save the world. Some stories were more important than telling stories. At midnight, exactly 1 year after the lights had come back on, people around the world did something that no one had organized or planned. They turned off their lights for exactly 47 minutes, the same amount of time the world had been dark a year ago. Cities went black by choice instead of by emergency. That IT wasn't mourning. It wasn't fear. It was remembrance. For 47 minutes, the world sat in voluntary darkness and thought about the 847 people who had died, the billions who had lived, and the impossible choice that had made the difference. When the lights came back on at 12:47 a.m., humanity felt different, grateful, humble, ready to face whatever came next. The Great Blackout had ended exactly 1 year ago, but its real impact was just beginning, because in those 47 minutes of darkness, the world had learned something precious. That sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones who make us feel good. Sometimes they're the ones who make the hard choices that no one else can make. And sometimes, the greatest act of love is being willing to be hated for doing what's right. Elon Musk looked out his office window at the California sky. Somewhere up there, his satellites were watching for the next threat, ready to make the next impossible choice if they had to. He hoped they'd never need to. But if they did, he was ready. The world was still turning. The lights were still on. Families were still together. And that was enough. That we'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment and tell us your city or country. If this story touched your heart or made you think differently about judging others too quickly, please hit that like button. It really helps us reach more people with stories that matter. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories about ordinary people making extraordinary choices. We share new stories every week that will inspire you, surprise you, and remind you of the good in humanity. Most importantly, please share this video with your friends and family. In a world that's quick to blame and slow to understand, we all need reminders about kindness, forgiveness, and the courage it takes to do what's right when everyone is watching. Thank you for listening. And remember, you never know when you might be the hero someone needs. Until next time, keep spreading kindness and awareness.